She had learned to make herself small. Not invisible, that was impossible in a place like the Obsidian, Dmitri Volkov's crown jewel of sin and silence. But small enough. Small enough to pass through hallways without leaving an echo. Small enough to press herself against walls when men in dark suits stormed past, their voices low and sharp as broken glass. Small enough to scrub blood from marble floors at 3 in the morning without anyone asking why a woman with trembling hands was the one holding the rag. Her name was Lena Frost, and she had been cleaning Dmitri Volkov's casino for 6 months. 6 months of learning the rhythm of violence. The way it breathed. The way it slept in the early hours before dawn, when even monsters grew tired. She knew which stairwells to avoid after midnight. Which bathrooms were used for business that had nothing to do with toilets. Which of the cocktail waitresses had black eyes they tried to hide with makeup, and which of the enforcers smiled too wide when they handed her a towel to wipe up something that used to be a man's teeth. Lena did not ask questions. She had learned long ago that questions were the quickest way to get someone killed. She pushed her cart through the back corridors of the Obsidian, the wheels silent on the industrial carpet. Her uniform was gray and shapeless, the kind of garment designed to make the wearer disappear into the wallpaper. Her hair was pulled back so tightly that her scalp ached, but the ache was familiar. Comfortable, even. Pain she could predict was pain she could survive. The bruises on her neck were not predictable. They bloomed in shades of violet and sickly yellow, a constellation of cruelty mapped onto her throat by fingers that had squeezed not to kill but to remind. That was Marcus Thorne's specialty. He never took a life when he could take a person's peace instead. He had found Lena 6 months ago, just before she started at the Obsidian, and he had shown her a photograph of her younger sister, Vera, laughing in a schoolyard. Then he had shown her a photograph of Vera sleeping. Then he had shown her a photograph of Vera through a rifle scope. Lena had not slept through the night since. She tugged the collar of her uniform higher, though the fabric was too thin and the bruises too high. The makeup she had applied before her shift had worn off hours ago, smeared away by nervous sweat and the unconscious habit of touching her own throat to make sure it was still intact. She knew she should reapply. She knew she should find the employee bathroom and fix herself before anyone saw. But she was tired. Tired in a way that went deeper than bone. Tired in a way that made her wonder if she had ever been anything else. The back hallway was empty. That was unusual. At this hour, just past 2 in the morning, there were usually runners moving cash between tables or guards switching posts, or the occasional low-level soldier nursing a drink and a grudge. But tonight the corridor was silent. The air was thick with something Lena had learned to recognize, the stillness before a storm. She should have turned around. Instead, she kept walking because Marcus had told her to watch for something tonight. He hadn't said what. He never said what. He simply sent her a text, a new number every time, always deleted, always untraceable, with an instruction. Be in the East Wing after 2. So she was in the East Wing after 2, pushing her cart like a shield, her heart beating a dull rhythm against her ribs. The door at the end of the hallway was slightly ajar. Lena knew that door. It led to a private room that Dmitri Volkov used for meetings that required absolute discretion. She had never been inside. She had been told, in no uncertain terms during her first week, that the room did not exist. That if she saw it, she did not see it. That if she heard something behind it, she heard nothing. Tonight, she heard breathing. Not the steady, controlled breathing of a man in charge. This was ragged, wet, the kind of breathing that followed pain. Lena stopped. Her cart stopped with her. She stood in the dim light of the hallway, one hand on the handle of a bucket that contained bleach and bad decisions, and she listened. A voice said, "Clean it up." She knew that voice. She had never heard it speak to her directly. She was too far beneath Dmitri Volkov for that, but she had heard it across crowded rooms, had felt it travel through walls and floors and the very foundation of the building. It was a voice that did not ask. It did not plead. It announced. The door swung open. Dmitry Volkov stood in the frame, and Lena understood immediately why the hallway had been empty. He had cleared it. He had emptied the east wing of everyone except himself and whoever was bleeding in that room, and now he was looking at her with eyes the color of winter storms, and she could not move.
He was taller than she had imagined. Or maybe it was the way he filled the doorway, the way his shoulders seemed to block out the light behind him. He wore a dark suit that probably cost more than she made in a year, and there was something dark on his cuff that she refused to identify. His jaw was set. His mouth was a line. He looked at her the way a man might look at a fly that had landed on his desk, not with anger, but with the mild curiosity of deciding whether to swat it. "You're the cleaner," he said. Not a question. Lena nodded. Her throat moved. The bruises throbbed in protest. He stepped forward, and Lena stepped back, and that was her mistake. Because stepping back was movement. Stepping back was acknowledgement of fear. And in Dmitry Volkov's world, fear was an invitation. "Come here," he said. She went. She didn't want to. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to drop the cart, to flee down the hallway and out of the service exit and into the night where she could disappear like she had always dreamed of disappearing. But Marcus Thorne's fingers had left more than bruises on her neck. They had left a leash. And Lena had learned that when powerful men told her to come, she came, because the alternative was always worse. She stopped 3 feet from him. Close enough to see the fine lines around his eyes. Close enough to smell gunpowder and expensive cologne and something metallic that she refused to name. Dmitry tilted his head. He was studying her the way she had seen him study a stack of papers once, quick, efficient, cataloging every detail. Her hands. Her posture. The way her pulse fluttered visibly in her throat. That was when he reached for her. She didn't flinch. She had trained herself not to flinch. But her breath caught, and she saw him notice that too. His fingers touched her chin, not roughly, not gently, but with the precision of a man who had never been refused anything in his life. He turned her face toward the light. And he saw the bruises. The hallway was quiet. Somewhere far away, a door closed. Somewhere closer, a man in the private room made a sound that might have been a groan. But Dmitry Volkov did not move. His fingers remained on her chin. His thumb rested against the edge of her jaw. And his eyes, those winterstorm eyes, went dark. Not with pity. Lena knew pity. She had seen it on social workers and sympathetic neighbors and the occasional kind-eyed cashier who noticed the way she always wore turtlenecks in summer. Pity was soft. Pity was sad. This was not pity. This was something breaking. Something deep inside Dmitry Volkov, something he had probably thought was made of iron and ice, cracked along a fault line he hadn't known existed. His grip on her chin loosened, but he did not let go. He traced the edge of the largest bruise with his thumb, featherlight, and Lena felt her eyes sting with tears she had not shed in months. "Who?" he said. It was not a question. It was a sentence. A promise. A death warrant waiting for a name. Lena looked at him. She looked at the blood on his cuff and the violence in his posture and the way his chest rose and fell with breaths that were no longer calm. And she thought of Vera. Of the rifle scope. Of the photograph of her sister sleeping. "No one," she whispered. Dmitry's hand fell away. He stared at her for a long moment. The crack inside him did not heal, it widened, splintered, let in something cold and hungry that he had never felt before. Possession. That was what this was. Not concern. Not compassion. Something uglier and more honest. He looked at Lena Frost with her gray uniform and her bruised throat and her refusal to give him a name, and he decided that she belonged to him now. Not because she had asked. Not because she had agreed. Because the sight of those marks on her skin had done something irreversible to the architecture of his soul. "Go back to work," he said. She went. She pushed her cart down the hallway, past the ajar door, past the sounds of the man who was bleeding inside, past the empty corridor and into the fluorescent light of the main floor where gamblers lost fortunes and no one looked at the cleaner. Her hands were steady. Her heart was not. Behind her, Dmitry Volkov stood in the dim light and watched her go. He did not know her name. He did not know her story. But he knew the pattern of those bruises, the spacing. Between them, the shape of the fingers that had made them. He had seen that pattern before. He had seen it on the necks of informants and traitors and men who owed Marcus Thorne money. He pulled out his phone and sent a single text to his brother, Roman. "Find out who cleans the East Wing." Then he turned back to the room where a dead man waited to be disposed of, and he smiled a smile that did not reach his eyes. Something inside him had shattered. But shattered things, Dmitry Volkov knew, made the sharpest weapons. Lena Frost did not know it yet, but she had just become his. The silence lasted 3 days. Not the quiet of peace, Lena had never known that. This was the silence of a predator deciding whether to pounce. Dmitry Volkov did not speak to her. Did not look at her. Did not acknowledge that he had ever touched her chin or traced her bruises or looked at her like she was something worth breaking for. He simply went back to being the man she had always known, distant, untouchable, the kind of danger that did not announce itself. But something had changed. Lena noticed it in small ways at first. The way Marcus's text stopped arriving. Not gradually, abruptly. One night she went to sleep expecting a new number, a new threat, a new photograph of Vera sleeping. The next morning there was nothing. The morning after that, still nothing. By the third day, she was certain it was a trap. Marcus Thorne did not release his grip on anyone. He simply tightened it in ways she could not see. She began to watch Dmitry. From across the casino floor, she watched him move through his kingdom like a shark through dark water. He never raised his voice. Never hurried. Never looked at her. But his men moved differently now. They nodded to her when she passed. One of them, a large man with a shaved head who had never acknowledged her existence, held a door open for her. Another made sure her cart was always where she left it, even when she forgot where she parked it. Roman Volkov was the worst. Dmitry's younger brother appeared at her elbow one night while she was scrubbing a stain out of the carpet near the bar. He did not introduce himself. He did not need to. Everyone knew Roman. He was the heat to Dmitry's ice, quick to smile, quicker to anger, and currently studying her with an expression that hovered somewhere between curiosity and contempt. "You're the one," he said. Lena kept scrubbing. "I'm the cleaner." Roman laughed. It was not a kind sound. "No. You're the one my brother can't stop thinking about. He doesn't know I know. But I know." He crouched beside her, lowered his voice. "Marcus Thorne's people have been pulling back all week. Did you notice? 3 of his operations went dark. 2 of his men disappeared. And you," he tapped her cart with one finger. "You just keep scrubbing." Lena's hand froze on the rag. She had not noticed Marcus's operations going dark. She had not noticed his men disappearing. But she had noticed the silence. The terrible, waiting silence that now made sense. Dmitry had not forgotten her bruises. He had been removing them. Not the marks on her skin, those were still fading, still tender, still a map of everything she feared. He had been removing the man who put them there. "Why?" she asked. Roman stood. He looked down at her with something almost like pity. "That's what I asked him." He didn't have an answer. Which means he doesn't know either. He turned and walked away, calling over his shoulder, "Be careful, cleaner. My brother has never saved anything he didn't eventually destroy." That night, Lena did something she had never done before. She went to Dmitry Volkov's office. The door was closed. 2 guards flanked it. They did not stop her. One of them nodded, actually nodded, and stepped aside. She pushed the door open without knocking, and she found him sitting behind a massive desk, reading something by the light of a single lamp. He did not look up. "Close the door," he said. She closed it. The office was larger than she had expected. Dark wood. Darker shadows. A window that looked out over the casino floor, where tiny figures moved like pieces on a board. Dmitry sat with his back to the glass, and in the low light he looked less like a man and more like a carving of one, all sharp edges and stillness. "Why are Marcus's men disappearing?" Lena asked. Dmitry turned a page. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't." Her voice cracked. She hated that it cracked. She stepped closer to his desk, her hands clenched at her sides. "Don't pretend. Roman told me. Something is happening to Marcus's operations, and it started 3 days ago. The same night you saw." She touched her throat. Stopped. "The same night." He set down his pen. For a long moment, he simply looked at her. Then he leaned back in his chair, and the shadows shifted across his face, and she saw it again, that crack inside him. Wider now. Deeper. Something was leaking out of it, something dark and warm and dangerous. "Marcus Thorne put his hands on you," Dmitry said. His voice was quiet. "That made it worse. He marked you. In my building. In my territory. While you were under my protection, whether you knew it or not." He folded his hands on the desk. There is no version of this story where he walks away. Lena's breath stopped. She had imagined this moment 100 times. Someone saving her. Someone killing Marcus. Someone pulling her and Vera out of the nightmare and setting them somewhere safe. But she had never imagined Dmitry Volkov. She had never imagined a man more dangerous than the one she was running from. "I'm not your property," she said. Dmitry stood. He walked around the desk, slow and deliberate, until he was close enough that she could see the faint scar above his eyebrow. He did not touch her. He simply stood there, looking down at her with those winterstorm eyes. "You're right," he said. "You're not my property." A pause. "You're my responsibility. There's a difference." "Is there?" He did not answer. Instead, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a photograph. He set it on the desk between them. Lena looked down. It was Vera. Her sister, sitting on a bench in the park near the group home. Eating an ice cream cone. Laughing at something off camera. Alive. Safe. Unwatched. "We moved her," Dmitry said. "Last night. She's in a new facility. No connection to you. No connection to Marcus. No one knows where she is except me and Roman." He looked at Lena. "I didn't do this for you. I did it because I couldn't sleep. Because every time I closed my eyes, I saw your throat." Lena picked up the photograph. Her fingers trembled. She had not seen Vera in 4 months, not in person, not in a photograph, not in anything except nightmares. She traced her sister's face with her thumb. "Why?" she whispered. Dmitry turned away. He walked to the window and looked down at the casino floor, where gamblers played and laughed and had no idea that the devil was watching them from above. "Because you looked at me," he said quietly, "and you said no one. You had every reason to give me a name. Every reason to let me kill him for you. And you said no one. Do you understand how rare that is?" He turned back to her. "Everyone in my life wants something from me. Everyone except you. You just wanted to be left alone. And Marcus Thorne took that from you." Lena set down the photograph. She looked at Dmitry Volkov, the monster, the king, the man who had just moved her sister across the country without asking permission, and she felt something shift inside her. Not gratitude. Something sharper. Something that felt like the beginning of trust, and that terrified her more than any bruise ever had. "I still won't give you his name," she said. Dmitry smiled. It was a small thing, barely a curve of his mouth, but it transformed his face. Made him almost human. "I already know it," he said. "I've always known it. I just needed you to choose to tell me." He walked back to his desk, sat down, picked up his pen. "You didn't. That's why I moved your sister. That's why I'm going to keep moving pieces until Marcus Thorne has nowhere left to stand." He looked at her over the rim of his reading glasses. "You're not my weapon, Lena. You're my reason." She stood there for a long time after that. The photograph of Vera remained on the desk. Dmitry did not look up again. But when she finally turned to leave, his voice stopped her at the door. "Wear a higher collar tomorrow." She touched her throat. The bruises were almost gone now, just faint smudges of yellow against pale skin. She had stopped covering them days ago. "Why?" she asked. Dmitry turned a page. "Because I don't want anyone else to see what I saw. What's mine stays mine." Lena left. She walked through the casino, past the gamblers and the servers and the guards who nodded to her now, and she did not look back. But she heard his words repeating in her head, over and over, like a warning she was already choosing to ignore. "What's mine stays mine." She did not know if she was terrified or relieved. She suspected she was both. The text came at 4:17 a.m. Lena was awake. She was always awake at 4:17 a.m., had been for months, ever since Marcus taught her that sleep was a luxury she had not earned. But this time the screen glowed with a number she did not recognize, and the message contained a photograph she could not unsee. Vera. Blindfolded. Kneeling on a concrete floor. The caption read, "You should have given him my name." Lena dropped the phone. It clattered against the floor of her tiny apartment, and she stared at it like it was a snake coiled to strike. Then she grabbed it, hands shaking so badly she nearly dropped it again, and she scrolled to the only contact she had saved under a false name. *work. Schedule change *. That was what she had labeled Dmitry Volkov's private line. She called. He answered on the first ring. "Talk. Marcus has Vera." Lena's voice did not sound like her own. It was thin and high and fractured. He sent a picture. She's on her knees. She's blindfolded. He knows. He knows I didn't give him up." Silence. Then, "Where are you?" "Home. Don't move." The line went dead. Lena did not move. She sat on the edge of her bed, still in her work clothes, still smelling of bleach and fear, and she stared at the photograph of her sister until the edges blurred. She had failed. She had tried to protect Vera by staying silent, and Marcus had found her anyway, because Marcus always found everyone, because Marcus was the kind of monster who fed on hope. 4 minutes later, 4 of the longest minutes of her life, a car appeared outside her window. Not a sleek black sedan. Something nondescript. Gray. Anonymous. The door opened, and Roman Volkov stepped out. He did not knock. He simply pushed open her front door. She had forgotten to lock it, and stood in her kitchen, looking at her with an expression she had not seen on him before. Serious. Almost gentle. "Get in the car," he said. "Dmitri is already moving. Get in the car, Lena. Now." She went. She did not remember putting on shoes. She did not remember locking her apartment. She did not remember the drive through the sleeping city, past closed shops and dark windows and the kind of normal life she had never been allowed to have. She only remembered Roman's voice on the phone, low and fast, giving coordinates and instructions, and once, very quietly, asterisk, "He's not going to survive this, brother. You know that, right?" Asterisk. The car stopped at a warehouse on the edge of the city. Not one of Dmitri's. Lena had learned to recognize his properties by the quality of the locks. This place was Marcus's. She could feel it in her bones. The neglect. The cruelty. The way the air itself seemed to hold its breath. Dmitri was waiting outside. He wore black. He always wore black, but tonight it looked different, sharper, darker, like the color had been distilled from something that used to be human. He did not look at Roman. He looked only at Lena, and when she climbed out of the car, he caught her by the shoulders and held her still. "Listen to me," he said. "I am going in there. I am going to get your sister. You are going to stay in this car with Roman, and you are not going to move, and you are not going to argue. I'm coming with you." "No. Marcus wants me. He wants to see my face when he..." Dmitri's grip tightened. Not painfully. Possessively. "I don't care what Marcus wants. I care about what I want. And I want you alive." He searched her face. "Do you understand what I'm saying to you?" Lena understood. He was not asking her to stay behind because she was weak. He was asking her to stay behind because he could not do what he needed to do if he was also watching her back. Because she was not a weapon or a distraction or a liability. She was the thing that would break him if he lost her. "Don't die," she whispered. Dmitri almost smiled. "I don't plan to." He turned and walked toward the warehouse. Roman grabbed Lena's arm, not roughly, but firmly, and guided her back toward the car. She let him. She sat in the passenger seat with the door open and her feet on the ground and her eyes fixed on the warehouse door, and she waited. The first gunshot came 3 minutes later. Then silence. Then more gunshots. Then screaming. Then a sound that Lena would never be able to describe to anyone, wet and final, and the kind of noise that lives in nightmares long after the dream ends. She counted the seconds. 147 of them passed before the warehouse door opened again. Dmitri emerged first. He was limping. There was blood on his shirt, too much blood, spreading across his ribs like a dark flower, but he was walking, and he was carrying something, and Lena realized with a jolt that the something was Vera. Her sister was limp in his arms, blindfold gone, face pale but chest rising and falling in small, desperate gasps. She was alive. Lena ran. She did not remember deciding to run. She simply found herself crossing the concrete lot, her shoes sliding on something slick, her arms reaching for her sister. Dmitri let Vera slide into her embrace. He staggered back, one hand pressed to his side, and Roman was there suddenly, catching him, forcing him to sit on the hood of the car. "She's not hurt," Dmitri said. His voice was strained. Scared. Dehydrated. But not hurt. He looked at Lena. "I told you I would get her." Lena held Vera against her chest. Her sister was crying, silent, shaking sobs that broke something inside Lena that she had been holding together for months. She rocked her. She whispered things that made no sense. She pressed her face into Vera's hair and breathed in the smell of fear and dust and relief. Then she looked up at Dmitri. He was bleeding through Roman's fingers. His face was gray. His eyes were still fixed on her, watching her the way he always watched her, like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. "You're hurt," she said. "It's nothing." Roman made a sound that was half laugh, half curse. "It's a knife wound, you idiot. Felix got you while you were carrying the girl. You didn't even feel it, did you?" Dmitri did not answer. He was still looking at Lena. She stood up, Vera still in her arms, her sister's weight solid and real and alive, and she walked toward him. She stopped inches away. She could see the wound now, the way his shirt was stuck to his skin, the way the blood kept coming despite Roman's pressure. You could have died, she said. I didn't. You could have. Dmitri reached up with his clean hand. He touched her face, her cheek, her jaw, the place where her pulse beat fast against her skin. His fingers were cold. They were also steady. If you die tonight, he said quietly, I burn the city down. Lena stared at him. She remembered saying those words to herself in the car, imagining him saying them, never believing he actually would. But here he was. Bleeding on a warehouse loading dock. Holding her sister's life in one hand and her face in the other. Looking at her like she was the only fire he had ever wanted to walk into. You're an idiot, she whispered. Probably. She leaned forward. She did not kiss him, not yet, not here, not with Vera between them and blood on his shirt. But she pressed her forehead against his, just for a moment, just long enough to feel him exhale. Then Roman was shouting for an ambulance, and Dmitri was sliding off the hood, and Vera was stirring in Lena's arms, and the night dissolved into sirens and chaos and the beginning of something Lena had never dared to name. But she did not let go of his hand. Not until they made her. The safe house smelled of dust and old wood and the faint metallic tang of Dmitri's blood. Lena had been there for 2 days. Not by choice, Roman had driven her and Vera straight from the ambulance bay to this place, a forgotten cabin an hour outside the city, and he had locked the door behind them. For their protection, he said. For Dmitri's peace of mind, he did not say. Vera slept in the back room. She had barely woken since the rescue, her body finally surrendering to the exhaustion that fear had held at bay. Lena checked on her every hour. Every time she found her sister still breathing, still safe, still here, she had to press her fist against her mouth to keep from sobbing. Dmitri was in the front room. He had refused the hospital. Refused stitches. Refused anything except a local doctor who worked for the Volkov family, a grim woman with steady hands who had cleaned his wound and sewn him up and left with a single instruction, keep him still for 48 hours. Dmitri had been still for approximately 0 of them. Lena found him standing at the window on the second morning, one hand braced against the frame, his weight shifted off his injured side. He wore a white t-shirt now, someone had brought clothes, and the bandage beneath it was clean, which meant he had changed it himself. Probably without anesthetic. Probably without flinching. You're supposed to be lying down, she said. He did not turn. I don't lie down. Your body doesn't care what you do. Now he turned. Slowly. Carefully. His face was pale beneath the stubble, and there were shadows under his eyes that made him look almost human. Almost breakable. My body, he said, is not the part of me that matters. Lena crossed the room. She stopped in front of him, close enough to see the way his pupils dilated, close enough to feel the heat coming off his skin. He was feverish. Of course he was feverish. He had taken a knife for her sister and then refused to let anyone treat him until he knew Lena and Vera were safe. You're stubborn, she said. I've been told. And arrogant. That too. And you're going to collapse if you don't sit down. Dmitri's mouth twitched. It was not quite a smile, but it was close. Are you always this bossy, or am I special? Lena did not answer. Instead, she took his hand, the one not pressed against the windowsill, and she pulled. He let her. He let her guide him away from the window, across the worn wooden floor, to the couch that sat beneath a dusty quilt. He sat. She sat beside him. Not close. Not far. Somewhere in between, where the space between them hummed with everything they had not said. They stayed like that for a long time. The sun moved across the floor. Vera slept. A bird sang somewhere outside, oblivious to the 2 broken people sitting in silence on a second-hand couch. Lena watched Dmitri's profile, the sharp line of his jaw, the way his breath came a little too fast, the hand that rested on his knee with fingers that had killed men and carried her sister and touched her face like she was something precious. Why did you do it? She asked. He turned his head. Do what? Go in alone. You had an army. You had Roman. You had guns and plans and everything a man like you is supposed to use. But you walked into that warehouse by yourself, and you got stabbed, and you almost died. She paused. Why? Dmitri was quiet for a moment. Then he reached out and took her hand. Not roughly. Not gently. The way a drowning man might reach for a rope. Because she was yours, he said. And you are mine. And I have spent my entire life watching other people pay for my choices. I was not going to let her be one of them. Lena's throat tightened. I'm not yours. No, he agreed. You're not. But I am yours. I have been since the moment I saw those bruises and realized I would kill anyone who touched you. That's not possession, Lena. That's surrender. She looked down at their hands. His fingers were laced through hers now, and his thumb was tracing slow circles on her palm. The gesture was so soft, so incongruous with everything she knew about him, that it made her chest ache. You barely know me, she whispered. I know you scrub the same spot on the floor 3 times even when it's already clean because you're thinking about something that hurts. I know you flinch when men raise their voices but you never back down when they raise their hands. I know you love your sister more than you love your own life, and I know you haven't slept through the night in months, and I know, his voice cracked. Just a little. Just enough. I know that when I was bleeding on that warehouse floor, the only thing I regretted was that I might never see you again. Lena lifted her head. She looked at him, really looked, past the reputation and the violence and the walls he had built around himself. She saw a man who had been taught that love was weakness. Who had learned to break things before they could break him. Who had held her sister in his arms while a knife went into his side and had not let go. She kissed him. It was not gentle. It was not the kind of kiss she had imagined in the quiet moments when she let herself imagine anything at all. It was desperate and hungry and tasted faintly of the salt from tears she had not realized she was crying. Her hands found his face. His hands found her waist. He pulled her closer, and she let him, and the world outside the cabin ceased to exist. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. Dimitri's forehead rested against hers. His eyes were closed. I should not want you, he said. You are the first good thing that has happened to me in 20 years, and I should walk away from you because I will ruin you. Everyone I touch, I ruin. Lena pulled back. She looked at him, this man who had killed for her, bled for her, shattered for her, and she smiled. It was a small smile. It was also the first real one she had given anyone in a very long time. Then don't touch me, she said. Just stay. He opened his eyes. Something passed across his face, fear, hope, a kind of wonder he had probably never allowed himself to feel. Then he pulled her against his uninjured side, and he wrapped his arm around her, and he pressed his lips to her hair. I can do that, he said. They stayed like that until the sun went down. Morning came too fast. Lena woke to the sound of an engine. She sat up, disoriented, her hand reaching automatically for Dimitri. But he was already standing at the window again, fully dressed, his posture rigid despite the wound in his side. What is it? She asked. Roman. She joined him at the window. A black car was pulling up the gravel drive, and Roman Volkov was climbing out, his face set in lines she had learned to recognize. Something was wrong. Something had happened. Dimitri opened the door before Roman could knock. Marcus is dead, Roman said. We found him an hour ago. But before he died, he made a call. He told someone where you were. Not the cabin, something else. Something worse. Dimitri's body went still. What did he say? Roman looked past his brother, at Lena. His expression was not unkind, but it was not gentle either. It was the look of a man delivering a eulogy. He told the families, Roman said. All of them. He told every rival, every enemy, every person who has ever wanted Dmitri Volkov dead, that there is a woman. That she has his heart. That she is the only thing keeping him from burning the world down. He paused. They're coming, Dimitri. All of them. And they're not coming for you. Lena felt the blood drain from her face. Dimitri turned to her. His eyes were dark and endless and full of something she had never seen in them before. Terror. Not for himself. For her. Pack your sister, he said. We're leaving. Now. Where? He did not answer. He just looked at her, this woman who had become his collateral heart, his single vulnerability, the crack in his armor that every enemy would now try to exploit, and he made a promise without speaking a word. He would keep her alive. Even if it killed him. They ran for 3 weeks. Not together, that would have been too easy, too traceable. Dimitri sent Vera to a safe house in a different country, guarded by people Lena never met. He sent Lena to a small town where no one knew her name, where she worked in a diner and slept in a rented room and waited for word that never came. He stayed in the city, drawing the enemy's fire, letting them believe he was alone. He was not alone. He had never been more full of someone. The night it ended, Lena was washing dishes. The diner was empty. The radio played something soft and forgettable. And then the door opened, and she turned, and Dmitri Volkov stood in the doorway with a new scar on his jaw and something quiet in his eyes. It's done, he said. She set down the dish. She walked to him. She did not ask who was dead or how many or what it had cost him. She simply reached up and touched the scar on his jaw, and he caught her hand and pressed it to his mouth. Marcus is gone, he said against her fingers. The families have been reminded why no one touches what belongs to me. Your sister is on a plane back as we speak. And you, he stopped. Swallowed. You are free, Lena. Truly free. No leash. No debt. No monster waiting in the dark. She looked at him. This man who had shattered for her. Who had killed for her. Who had let her go so she could choose to come back. What if I want the monster, she asked. Dimitri's breath caught. Then he pulled her into the diner's back booth, and he held her face in his hands, and he kissed her like she was the first thing that had ever made sense to him. 6 months later, Lena wore a necklace he had given her, a simple silver chain with no pendant, because he said she did not need decoration to be precious. Vera lived in a small house near the ocean, far from the city and the violence and the memories. She was learning to laugh again. Dimitri still ran the underworld. That had not changed. What had changed was the way he came home every night to a woman who did not flinch when he walked through the door. What had changed was the way she looked at him, not with fear, not with gratitude, but with something that looked like recognition. He thought love would make him weak. Instead, it made him lethal in a way no bullet ever could. Because now he had something to protect. Something worth surviving for. Something that turned a monster into a man, and a man into something she was not afraid to call hers. Lena Frost never became a mob wife. She became a choice he made every morning when he woke up beside her. And that, she learned, was the only kind of power that mattered. The end. If you want more dark romance stories with shattered men, rescued women, and slow-burn tension that doesn't let go until the very last word, subscribe to my channel. Tap the button below so you never miss a chapter.